You did it again. You're standing right in front of someone you've met at least 3 times, maybe 4, and their name has completely vanished. Not on the tip of your tongue. Not somewhere in the back of your mind. Gone. Fully absent, as if your brain never bothered to save the file in the first place. No backup, no recycle bin, nothing. But here's the thing, the forgetting itself isn't even the worst part. The worst part is the next 12 seconds. The performance you're about to put on for absolutely free. Casually tilting your head, desperately scanning the room hoping someone will just say their name out loud or their phone rings, or final option, the building catches fire. You know the drill. We've all been there. But here's what I want you to understand. People who consistently forget names are not careless, not rude. And they are almost certainly not as unintelligent as they quietly believe they are at 2 a.m. There is something very specific happening inside their brains, and once you understand it, you will never feel quite as guilty about this the same way again. So, let's get into it. When you meet someone new, your brain is not sitting around with nothing to do, patiently waiting to memorize their name. It is running a full system at maximum capacity simultaneously. Reading their face, picking up on their tone of voice, figuring out the social context, calculating where you stand in the interaction, deciding whether they like you, deciding whether you like them, reminding you to stop crossing your arms. Your working memory, the short-term holding space in your prefrontal cortex, is basically juggling 6 things at once. And right in the middle of all that beautiful cognitive chaos, someone hands you a single arbitrary sound. Their name. Hey, I'm Kevin. Cool. Kevin means nothing. It doesn't connect to anything you already know. It doesn't trigger a concept, an image, a feeling, or an association. It just floats there completely isolated in a brain that, let's be honest, is way too busy to care about it right now. Psychologists actually have a name for why this happens. Back in 1987, researchers McWeeny and Ellis published a fascinating study demonstrating what we now call the Baker-Baker paradox. They told one group of participants that a person in a photo was a baker, as in the profession. They told another group that the person's last name was Baker. A few days later, the people who learned the occupation remembered it far more easily than the people who learned it as a name. Same word, wildly different recall, because baker as a job pulls up a whole network of associations: bread, flour, early mornings, warmth, that smell, while baker as a name pulls up absolutely nothing. It just floats. Names have no roots. They are by nature semantically empty. Your brain is an efficiency machine, and it prioritizes storing things that mean something. A one-syllable sound handed to you at the exact moment you're trying to act normal in front of a stranger? Good luck. Think about the last funeral you attended. You probably still remember the smell of the flowers, the specific quality of the silence in the room, the kind that doesn't exist anywhere else. You remember who cried the most? Either a sentence someone said that hit differently than you expected. What you almost certainly don't remember is what was printed on the funeral program, because your brain made an executive decision without consulting you about what mattered. And printed text never made the cut. Names never made the cut. Now here's where things get a little personal, because this part is more intimate than most people want to admit. A significant portion of people who consistently forget names are people who are extremely stuck inside their own heads during social interactions, not out of arrogance, but out of anxiety. While the other person is introducing themselves, the internal monologue is already going. Am I making enough eye contact? Was that handshake too firm? Did I just interrupt them? What does my face look like right now? Yeah, the name gets mentioned for half a second, then the inner commentary drowns it out completely. This has actually been documented. There's a phenomenon called the next-in-line effect, first recorded by psychologist Malcolm Brenner in 1973. People who were waiting for their turn to speak in a group showed significantly worse memory for what the person right before them said, because mentally they had already moved on to preparing what they were about to say. They were editing themselves in real time. And people who live with social anxiety or even just chronic self-consciousness are basically stuck in that state permanently, never fully present, always half a step ahead into what's coming next. Which means the moment a name is handed to them, they're already somewhere else. So here's the reframe that actually matters. You don't have a memory problem. You have an absorption problem. Those are two very different things. And it's worth saying something to the people on the other side of this, the ones who get forgotten, because the emotional sting is real, and it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. Being forgotten, especially repeatedly, lands like a small but sharp message. You weren't important enough to remember. That's the feeling, even when it's completely inaccurate. That's what the brain hears, and the brain doesn't always process things rationally. But the person who forgot your name probably thought about your conversation afterward. They remember what you said about your sister or the way you laughed at something unexpected. They were there. They just weren't paying attention to the part that was your name. Here's what most people fundamentally misunderstand about memory. It is not a recording device. Your brain doesn't store experiences the way a hard drive stores files. It stores impressions, emotions, patterns, fragments, and it prioritizes ruthlessly. Things with emotional charge get stored. Things that were surprising get stored. Things that connected to what you already knew get stored. One arbitrary syllable handed to you at the exact moment you're performing normalcy in front of a stranger? Not so much. And this is actually the interesting part. People who forget names tend to share something else in common. They think in associations. Their memory is rich with context and feeling. They remember stories. They remember the look on someone's face when they said something that mattered. Ask them what someone was wearing at a party 3 years ago, and they might actually tell you, then completely blank on the name of the person standing right next to them. Because their brain was busy recording everything except the label. That is not a defect. That is a specific architecture, one that is genuinely better suited for storytelling, for emotional attunement, for the kind of listening that makes people feel actually understood, and slightly less suited for the mechanical task of registering a sound under social pressure. This doesn't mean you shouldn't try to get better at it. Repeating someone's name immediately when you meet them works. Connecting it to an image or someone you already know works. These strategies are effective because you are manually doing what your brain refuses to do automatically, building the connection that wasn't there. You're essentially constructing a small bridge between Kevin and something that already has a place in your mind. But the shame spiral, the quiet, persistent belief that forgetting names makes you someone who moves through the world without really noticing people, that is wrong, and it is worth saying clearly, because a lot of people carry it without ever examining where it came from, or whether it's actually true. You are not absent. You are not indifferent. You are someone with a brain that prioritizes differently, governed by its own internal weather, and that occasionally fails at the least interesting thing about a person, the arbitrary sound their parents assigned them before they had done anything worth remembering. The name is always the least important part. What you remember about people is the real stuff, the human stuff, the part that's still there, the part that was always there. If you found this video helpful, go ahead and hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people find this kind of content. And if you want to understand yourself and the people around you a little better, subscribe to Minimal Psychology and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. There's a lot more where this came from.